You know, we could have gone on all afternoon telling Dr. Campbell stories, and some of them we probably couldn't tell in the church, but this is only part church, so I think it's open season. There were a couple of other quips that I had, and in my little soliloquy about the cell phone bit, Dr. Campbell also told me that he wanted to reconcile any differences he had with anybody on this earthly life. He said that as hard as he's looked, everywhere he's looked, and he's looked hard to try to find him, but he still hasn't found Dean Bruce. Dr. Campbell went to all the M&M conferences at the VA that Dr. Reed presided over. And Dr. Reed had this uncanny habit of, right in the middle of a presentation, of jumping out of his chair, turning around and looking out into the audience to see who was nodding off. And the students and the residents were deathly afraid of being caught. And it was at a bad time. It was at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Well, Dr. Campbell got caught one day, and he was nodding off a bit. And Dr. Reed called on him and said, "Well, Dr. Campbell, this is a particularly difficult case. Tell us how you would manage it." Dr. Campbell woke up and he said, "Well, I would just cut him from stem to sternum, fix what's wrong, and close him up tight." I'm going to turn the microphone over to Dr. Hugh Burnett, who truly was one of his star residents, and let him get on with it.
In just a moment, we're going to have a little ceremony. John's going to fix up a little libation that we can see Dr. Campbell off with that we think is entirely suitable, particularly since he probably did not get served as he was getting into the ambulance and is probably still a little disgruntled about that. One of the stories that stuck in my mind from the time I heard it was during M&M one day. We hadn't been looking particularly good. Dr. Campbell gets up and says, "Now look," he says, "what we're trying to do here is we're trying to build a surgery program that our football team can be proud of." Well, I guess we've pretty much passed them up now, haven't we? But the quips that he made, the one-liners, they're just absolutely legion. And I'm going to have all of his previous residents recite one if your memories can go back that far. Meanwhile, I'd like to have each of his residents that he trained come on up here where I am, or where John is. I don't know.
Most of them did.
No, we're talking about the
scotch. It was here. Nothing? You talked to her last. Where is she?
Well, this is going to take a moment because the ceremonial libation has been thieved from a house of worship, for the Lord's sake. I mean, I've seen it all now. Well, perhaps I haven't, but I'll soon have seen it all. Any news, John? No news.
Nothing's checking on her.
Who are we looking for?
We're looking for
The lady from Rose.
Mr. Dewar.
You stole it.
Yeah, here, you got a little something for her.
All right, here we go, down this way.
I don't have anything.
Okay, you're up. You get to tell some anecdotal stories.
Well, I don't remember any. I'm so old.
We can increase your air set.
Here.
This is not an anecdotal story that happened at the hospital. When I was taking my oral general surgery, it's working. You're not here? I guess you're old. You're old, yeah. I was taking my oral general surgery boards in St. Louis. I was in a small room up on the 3rd or 4th floor, and I was noticing when I was checking in or going in after eating or something like that, they were rolling a piano into a suite next to my room. I looked at that and I said, well, this can't be good. Well, after dinner that night, I walked up and there was Dr. Campbell and a bunch of his colleagues, the examiners for the boards the next day. They proceeded to have the typical Scotch libation and drink and sing Army songs all night till about 4 in the morning. And I was thinking, oh my God, I got my boards tomorrow. I can't call a hotel and complain because these are the examiners. So I just kind of got up bleary-eyed the next day and took my boards.
I had a couple of things I could say about Dr. Campbell. One thing is, I was a resident, maybe a second-year resident, making rounds, and I think someone paged me or asked me to come down to the clinic and do minor surgery on whatever it was. And I made the mistake of making that comment, so I have to go do minor surgery. And Dr. Campbell said, Doctor, there's no such thing as minor surgery, only minor surgeons. And the other thing is, I was a first-year resident, just finished my first-year residency with Dr. Weiss and Dale Morris, and one of the other residents dropped out of the program to go into general practice. And I got drafted. This was in 1971. And Dr. Campbell got wind of it, and he just absolutely just almost had a fit. Depleting the program, only have 2 residents left in that particular level. So he took me in the car. We drove to DeWitt, Arkansas, which is where the draft board was in Arkansas County, and basically just told the draft board man there that he had to have me there. Otherwise, it's going to deplete the program. So I got a deferment for the rest of my residency, all because of Dr. Campbell.
As someone kind of involved in politics, you may not want to tell that. That may come back to haunt you.
Well, if he had not intervened, I probably wouldn't have married my wife. We had just started dating, and if I'd gone off in the Army, I doubt if I'd be married to her now.
I remember a lot of things about Dr. Campbell. It's hard to think of specific things right now. I do know this. He always had our back. He took good care of his boys. Dr. Campbell took good care of us. I remember when Galladay tried to get me fired because I told him I would kick his ass if he ever talked to me the way he talked to me one night in front of the nurses and a family. And I think Dr. Campbell kept him from firing me. Not sure. It never went anywhere. Westbrook's looking at me askance here. I will tell you that I was very fortunate to go to the University of Minnesota for a year. Dr. Campbell helped me get there, as did Dr. Reed. And I was amazed at the people who were still there, secretaries, some of the medical staff, people who remembered Dr. Campbell, who'd been there when he was there, and were interested to know that I was from Arkansas and would say, well, you know, how's Gil Campbell? That was amazing to me. Very interesting.
I did remember something that John brought to, or somebody brought to my mind. One of the most feared board examiners, oral board examiners, was Hiram Polk. And everybody knew that. Well, I get to Houston, and the first examiner is Hiram Polk and someone else. I suppose it went okay, but I was in the airport 3 or 4 hours later at the end of the day, and I was standing in line, and he came up to me and tapped me on the shoulder and said, "How you doing, Cliff?" I had no idea he even knew my name. And I said, "I don't know, Dr. Polk." He said, "You're one of Gil's boys, aren't you?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "You remember back then we had to wait 6 weeks?" He said, "You did fine." That's the kind of influence Gil Campbell had.
I was telling my wife on the way here, yeah, you know, all of these guys were really important in my life. that you see up here that Dr. Campbell trained. I can remember as a medical student going to the operating room and seeing this gentleman right here operating. I thought, my God, how could anybody be more important than a general surgeon? It was the most incredible thing for me. And that's really why I ended up going into that. I started in medicine, and I went to Kent Westbrook. Where'd he go? And I said, Dr. Westbrook, I'm going to go do some internal medicine at Minnesota. Do you think I could come back? And he said, yeah, sure, just call me. And after I had done some internal medicine, I thought, what a mistake. And I called, and I said, can I come back? And he said, sure, come on back. And, when I finished my general surgery and went into private practice, I thought, I really always kind of wanted to do heart surgery. And because I saw guys like this guy over here, that everybody in the country said, my God, he's got the best hands on the earth. And, I thought, I want some of that or whatever. And I started looking around at heart surgery programs, and there was only one opening in the United States, and it was in New Orleans at the Oxnard Clinic. And I called Dr. Campbell, and I said, Dr. Campbell, I called Dr. Campbell. I said, Dr. Campbell, do you think you could help me get in there? And magically, he called John Oxner, his good buddy, and suddenly I was in there. So, I always hold a little special part of my heart for Dr. Campbell because he did have that kind of influence on folks.
I was particularly impressed by all of the visiting professors which we had, who Dr. Campbell knew well. I was especially impressed when I took my oral boards in Dallas. I went down with a fellow from New York who had finished Columbia, and the night before we went out to eat, and who do we see but the head of his program in Columbia, Keith Reemsma. And we did wind up going to the bar for a little while. And so
that's unusual for you.
So the next morning when I start out, I didn't really feel at the top of my game. And when I go in to my first two examiners, who's there but Keith Reemsma and Stan Dudrick, who came down here as a visiting professor on a number of occasions that I'd met before. They took pity on me and resuscitated me with black coffee and donuts for about 10 to 15 minutes, after which the rest of the day was fine. That was, you met a lot of people through Dr. Campbell's influence.
Well, in the context of this libation ceremony, I want to dispel a little bit of a myth about Dr. Campbell's favorite drink being scotch. He did have some others, which goes back to a story of the Southwestern Surgical Congress meeting in Acapulco, Mexico, about 1977. Well, I had a little free time in the afternoon. Dr. Campbell rounds up some of us, me, Charlie Mabry, I forget who else, and he was in that little section of the Princess Hotel high-rise, and he had a balcony suite up there about the 8th or 9th floor. So we go up there, and he starts breaking out the White Russians. Well, after a few of those, he looks out and he sees these Mexicans with a Jeep down on the beach with a big old parachute behind this big old thing, and he says, by God, I want to go do that. I said, this is not going to be a good idea. And he said, no, we're going. So he goes down there with his tropical shirt, his tropical, shorts and everything, and they hook him up, and he's down there, and he's got his favorite wingtip shoes on. And they take him down the beach, and he goes way up there, and I can't reproduce it, but you could hear Dr. Campbell. We were up there. My wife was filming this on a little 8mm camera, and you could hear him going down the beach, this Mexican pulling him going, Even more funny is the wind was blowing so hard, the Jeep stopped, but the wind kept him up there. They couldn't get him down. And that was even funny, see them having to put that Jeep in reverse and back up to finally get him down with his wingtips on that beach. None would have it, but he had all the rest of us come down, and a bunch of us had to do the same thing as the chief. So those are just a fond memory of Dr. Campbell and how he liked to have his boys around him and took care of us all.
I'm a little bit different. I'm going to be talking about something serious. I was coming here as a boat people guy, Vietnamese, and he plugged me up from the team in Pittsburgh for Dr. Banson, where I participated. He came to Vietnam back in January 1973, so that's been exactly 45 years ago. He took me down here, and of course, as somebody immigrating from Vietnam, I didn't have much chance to learn English. And this is a way that I learned both medicine and English and practice medicine. And he told me one day, he said, Dai, you have to do something. He said, what is that, sir? You know, my guys was telling you that you come in to see patients. He said, listen, sir, I'm Dr. Dai. And everybody was so concerned. And I didn't know exactly what to do, though, because in the Vietnamese fashion, we always use the first name. The last name is reserved, and nobody touched the last name because it's sacred. So later on, when I applied for the board, I guess I'm going to be in the state for the rest of my life. I better take my last name is Nguyen, and the first name is Dai. But I remember very fondly from Dr. Banson, from Dr. Campbell, is that he's a researcher, and he spent a lot of time in the labs, and you knew that he used the two lungs, I think, as a first way of CPB to resuscitate, I think, in the heart problems. So I work on a couple of programs with him. I work on the creation of aortic stenosis, coarctations in the rabbits, and feed the rabbits with a lot of chows, very rich in cholesterol. We had the results, and I didn't stay too long so that we can compile that, but that same year, Saberson's group presented exactly the reverse, saying that hypotension preserves the aortic wall from arteriosclerosis. And our finding is that hypotension worsened the arteriosclerosis in the mode of coarctation in the rabbits, but we never published that. Second thing also to deal with the creation of erythrocytosis by taking the blood from the vena cava and put that in the left atrium so that it can bypass the right side. I worked on that for like 3 months. We never went anywhere, but that gave me some time, I think, to learn about English, and then it took my board, and then finally I went through the whole things, and with everything that's been doing to us, to my family too, we've been going to serve the University of Iowa for 8 years, and chief of transplants in Pittsburgh for 22 years, and then 2 more years at UC Davis. The thing which is very open for Dr. Campbell is that he's very personal. When he came here, he took my shoulder, he said, Dai, hey, listen, I got you an apartment just across the street from university, okay? And I got you a grant of $500. This is grants not from me. But that's the way he is a gentleman, Southern gentleman. And I've respected that and remember that all my life. It's been effective. Thank you.
Dr. Dai, thank you. I was just going to add something. Dr. Dai, Kitten and I visited Vietnam last year in February. And I have to tell you, that's a beautiful, beautiful country, beautiful people. And for some reason, they still like us. It's amazing, and I would recommend that trip to anyone in here. It's absolutely breathtaking. I was going to tell one other little story, and somehow, Dr. Dai, I'm sorry, but this one is about Thailand. Dr. Campbell went off, I think, for about 3 months during our residency and was visiting professor in Bangkok. He came back, and he was all happy, and he came to Grand Rounds that morning. This could be a little off-color, folks. He came to Grand Rounds and announced to all of us that he was leaving, that he had accepted a position in Thailand. Well, we were moaning and crying and carrying on a little bit. And he says, I'm going to work for the railroad. I said, well, Dr. Campbell, what are you going to do for the railroad? And he said, lay ties.
I've got one quick thing to mention about Dr. Dai. I was starting my chief resident year in general surgery when Dr. Dai came here. The year was underway, and we were rolling pretty hard. about a week or two into it, I think my junior residents were Joe Howe and John Ransom, and of course that was trying to make silk purse out of sow's ears. Turned out pretty well. Dr. Campbell called me in one day. Ms. Sandy calls me in one day, said Dr. Campbell wanted to see me. I thought, my gosh, awful early in the year for that. You know, that's usually 6 months or so. So I go in there and he says, here he says, I got another resident for you. And I said, good. I don't have but two. We need some more. He says his name is Di. And I said, excuse me? He says his name is Di. I said, this isn't going to work out too well, is it, Chief?
Oh, that's what I was going to say. We haven't been able to find the scotch. We know that the lady that was here who was talking to Muffin had it in her hand. She said people had been dipping into it. Now she's gone. So we know, we have a pretty idea that it's in Dr. Campbell's casket. Anyway, I think that's all I had. I'll think of something else in a minute. Anybody else? Come on, don't be bashful. Oh, I wanted to say one thing. Well, no, we're going to toast him in just a second, but I've got one thing to say. Is Ransom still here? Where's Ransom? Okay, well, if he's not here, it's too bad. I looked at all the pallbearers, and it seems that all of us have changed a little bit, and it appears that only John Ransom is the one who's still using Grecian formula. Too bad he isn't here. Okay, well, in the absence of the scotch, all of our residents are going to make a toast. Hugh?
Dr. Campbell, I'm sorry that she stole your scotch. She's worse than the ambulance driver that wouldn't let you have one for the road. We just wanted to have one in his honor and to see him off. Godspeed, Chief.
Dr. Campbell would remind us from time to time as we were stumbling through it, and perhaps we weren't looking like we were the brightest bulb in the pack. He said, and this is one of the confidence builders he gave us, he said, if you can't dazzle them with your brilliance, then baffle them with bovine scatology.